We are reading Gooney Bird and the Room Mother by Lois Lowry, and we are on chapter 6. Why do we have to have cardboard costumes? Beanie complained. At ballet class, we have stretchy satin. And for the recital, I have my shimmering wings attached. They're gold. Hold still, Mrs. Pigeon told her. I have to cut this very carefully. I don't want to miss and cut your hair. Beanie stood very still. She looked nervous. Don't you dare, she said. I'm growing my hair to my waist. Ha, shouted Malcolm. Beanie's hair goes to the waist basket. There, Mrs. Pigeon said. You can move now, Bean. She lifted the white cardboard that she had been cutting. The reason we have cardboard costumes is because we already have cardboard, so it doesn't cost anything. And it makes good pilgrim hats and Native American headbands. Malcolm, she glared at him, stop tormenting Beanie. Is your belt buckle almost finished? There she is cutting the hat for her, or the costume. Malcolm nodded and went back to his work. All of the Pilgrim boys were making large cardboard belt buckles. I saw a guy with a skull on his belt buckle, he announced. He was a Hell's Angel. Cool, said Ben. A real skull? No, fake. Keiko looked up from the beads she was gluing to her Native American headband. Don't talk about skulls, she said nervously. It makes me feel sick. My mom has skull earrings, Tyrone announced. She wore them on Halloween. They dangled. 2 little skulls. Keiko stopped gluing beads and put her hands over her ears. These belt buckles will be very plain, Mrs. Pigeon said. The Pilgrims didn't decorate their clothing. The Native Americans did, though. Look what a good job Keiko is doing. Gently, she reached down and removed Keiko's hands from her ears so that Keiko could continue attaching beads before her glue dried. Me too, look at mine. Trisha held up her headband. And mine's the best, Nicholas said. Mrs. Pigeon walked around the room admiring the work of each second grader. I'm proud of you all, she said, smiling. Pilgrim girls, even though you don't have decorations, your white bonnets are quite lovely. Chelsea? She said, adjusting Chelsea's cardboard hat. I think you might want to trim yours back a bit so it doesn't cover your eyes that way. And Native Americans, when you finish your beading, you may each add 1 feather from the feather pile. She reached for Tyrone's hand, which had quickly grabbed the entire collection of feathers. Just 1, Tyrone. Remember, we talked about sharing just yesterday. Scowling, Tyrone selected a yellow feather and put the rest back. I wish I could be a Native American, Chelsea said, frowning. I hate my pilgrim hat. It's just too plain. Beanie, wearing her white cardboard bonnet, patted Chelsea's arm. But we were very brave, she reminded her. We crossed the ocean, remember? And not in a cruise ship either. Ben, looking up from under the brim of his tall black pilgrim hat, added, feathers are for babies. Pilgrims were tough and mean. They battled pirates. Actually, Mrs. Pigeon said, I don't think the Pilgrims encountered pirates at sea, but they certainly were brave. You're right about that, Ben. Can you lift your hat up a little so your eyes show? Ben tilted his head back so that he could see. All the Pilgrims had their heads tilted back. Somehow, the pilgrim hats were all a little too large. Good work, everyone, Mrs. Pigeon continued, looking around at the class. And you've all memorized the words to the food song? All the Native Americans and Pilgrims nodded. We'll practice it again when we get the headgear all done. Have you written the Room Mother song yet, Mrs. Pigeon? Gooney Bird asked. She was coloring Squanto's headband carefully. I'm working on it. There's a little problem with rhyming, Mrs. Pigeon said. If only she'd let us use her name. Absolutely not, Gooney Bird said, incognito. Well, if you'd explain to her what a problem it creates, for example, Mrs. Pigeon said, if the song went, "Hail to thee, Room Mother Green," then the next line could easily, "Best room mother we've ever seen." Gooney Bird stopped coloring. She glared at Mrs. Pigeon. I just used that as an example, Mrs. Pigeon explained hastily. I didn't intend to give anything away. I could have used a different example, like Room Mother Brown, for instance, best room mother in town. Gooney Bird put her hands on her hips. I talked to her last night, and she said that if anyone says her name, if anyone reveals her identity, she will not bring cupcakes, and she will not even come to the pageant, no matter how many songs you write. Well, then, she will remain incognito, Mrs. Pigeon laughed, and I'll create the best song I can under the circumstances. Thank you. And what about Squanto's dance, Gooney Bird? Have you been working on it? Gooney Bird frowned. Yes, it's hard though. I keep wanting to do the hula. The hula? My grandmother can do the hula, Keiko said. She lives in Hawaii. That's lovely, Keiko. If she comes to visit, maybe she can give us lessons, Mrs. Pigeon said. My grandma can do the funky chicken, Chelsea said. She stood with her white pilgrim hat falling forward in order to demonstrate. Gross, Nicholas and Ben said together, watching Chelsea wiggle her behind. Mrs. Pigeon played a loud chord on the piano in order to get the class's attention. Then she began to play some low notes in a repetitive way. Pretend this is the drum beat. Gooney Bird, Squanto should move across the stage, keeping time to the sound of the drums. Maybe rhythmic foot hopping too? I guess so, Gooney Bird said. I'll work on it at home. And it'll be easier when I have my costume on. I'll feel more like a real Squanto in my costume. I'll feel authentic then. Mrs. Pigeon picked up the chalk and added authentic to the word list. True and original, known to be trustworthy, Beanie read from her dictionary. That's right. That's Squanto, all right, said Gooney Bird. Chapter 7. Oh, that looks like a pilgrim hat with a feather. I've got the Room Mother song finished, Mrs. Pigeon announced. She sat down at the piano. We'll need to learn it quickly because, as you know, the Thanksgiving pageant is next week. Gather around, she said, and now that we've finished the hats and headbands, why don't we wear them while we sing? This will be sort of a dress rehearsal. Pilgrims over here, she pointed to the left, and Native Americans here, she pointed to the right. The second graders, wearing their headgear, arranged themselves around the piano. I can't see, Nicholas called. His pilgrim hat had slid down over his eyes. Beanie, her own white bonnet falling across her forehead, leaned over and lifted his hat up. Stand very still, she told him, so it doesn't fall down again. How about me? Gooney Bird asked. Where should Squanto stand? Probably in the middle, right? Because he's the star, right smack in the middle of everything? In the middle is fine, Mrs. Pigeon said. What is that on your head, Gooney Bird? Squanto's hat. I thought you were making a headband. I saw you making a headband. I decided Squanto should have a better hat than the other Native Americans because he's been to England, remember? Well, yes, he did travel there, but that's a top hat, Gooney Bird. Something an ambassador might wear. I think Squanto brought it back from England. He probably went shopping and bought a lot of new clothes there. People always buy new clothes when they travel. That's true. My mom went to Hawaii to visit my grandma and she bought a muumuu, Keiko said. My dad went to Albuquerque on business and he brought back a silver and turquoise black belt buckle, Tricia said. My mom and dad went, Chelsea began. Mrs. Pigeon sighed. She played a chord on the piano to quiet the children. Then she played a simple melody. She played it again and sang, Room Mother. She looked around the room. Recognize that? It's the melody from Moon River. All the second graders shook their heads. I know a song about a man on the moon, Beanie said. I know one about a cow that jumped over the moon, Ben said. I know one about Shine on Harvest Moon, Nicholas said. I know a moon song, Tyrone announced. Listen. Oh, Mr. Moon, moon, bright and shiny moon, please shine down on me. No, no, Mrs. Pigeon played the melody again. Room, mother, she sang. Try it with me. Room, mother, all the children sang. Keiko's headband fell forward across her eyes. She pushed it back up, but her bangs got caught. I can't see, Felicia Ann whispered. Her pilgrim bonnet had lurched down over her forehead. Oh dear, Mrs. Pigeon said, turning around on the piano bench. We're having hat problems of all sorts. Let's not worry about that now, though. We need to learn this song. The next line is, she hesitated. Well, if we were singing the original song, it would be wider than a mile. But of course, we don't want the room mother to think we are commenting on how wide she is, do we? Mrs. Pigeon winked at Gooney Bird. Gooney Bird shrugged. I don't think she'd mind, she said. I've changed it, Mrs. Pigeon said. So we'll sing Kinder Than a Smile instead. Give it a try after me, class. The Pilgrims and Native Americans all sang loudly. Kinder than a smile. Good, Barry. Can you push your headband up? Barry tried. Ben, pilgrim hat up. Ben tried. He wrinkled his face in order to hold the hat brim up. Next line. Your clothing is in style. Why would we say that, Mrs. Pigeon? Gooney Bird asked. Well, because it rhymes with smile. And although, of course, I don't know our room mother, although she's incognito, I suspect she's quite stylish, right? Because she comes from a stylish family. Mrs. Pigeon looked meaningful at Gooney Bird, who today was wearing a long flowered gypsy skirt, a leather vest, hiking boots, and red laces, and of course, a top hat she had explained Squanto would have brought back from his stay in England. Gooney Bird sighed. Okay, she said, whatever. Hooray! Mrs. Pigeon sang next. In the original song, here they are all singing with their headbands and hats falling in their faces. She explained, it says someday at that point, but someday doesn't work for us, really. No, said Malcolm loudly, because we'll want those cupcakes right away after the pageant. Let's try that first verse again from the beginning. Nicholas, can you see with your pilgrim hat down like that? No, said Nicholas from under his hat brim, but it's okay. I can sing. Room, mother, the second graders sang enthusiastically in unison. Wearing her top hat jauntily and singing as loudly as possible, Gooney Bird began testing some dance steps in the center of the room. I think Squanto probably learned the tango in England, she explained. Those were pretty short, so should I try chapter 8 too? And then we'll only have 2 chapters. Oh yeah, let's do that. Then we'll have only 2 chapters for Thursday. Chapter 8. On Tuesday morning of Thanksgiving week, the day before the pageant, Mrs. Pigeon wrote another new word on the board below authentic. She wrote fiasco and sighed and stared at the word. Dictionaries class, she instructed, though she hadn't needed to. The second graders had already reached for their dictionaries and began turning to the F section. Barry Tuckerman waved his hand in the air. I found it, he called out. When Mrs. Pigeon nodded to Barry, he stood and read aloud. A total failure. Mrs. Pigeon sighed. Correct, Barry. Good dictionary work. The word fiasco means a total failure, especially a humiliating one. Say it after me, class. Fiasco, 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 the second graders said aloud. The gerbils, usually quiet in their cage in the corner, unexpectedly began to fight. They chittered noisily and chased each other in a circle. A paper thumbtack to the bulletin board suddenly came loose and fluttered to the floor. The radiator hissed. Outside, it was raining in a steady drizzle. What's wrong, Mrs. Pigeon? Asked Beanie. You look sad. Did we do something wrong? No, you children have all worked so hard. I'm very proud of you, Mrs. Pigeon said. But I'm worried about the Thanksgiving pageant, she confessed. I'm afraid it will be a fiasco. No, it won't. Look, I got my cast off, Ben reminded her, holding up his arm. My arm works. We sent the invitation, said Felicia Ann, and remember, we put turkey stamps on them. The Muriel's done, Barry pointed out. It turned out great. We only have to hang it up in the multi-purpose room. The room mother says the cupcakes are all ready for tomorrow afternoon, Gooney Bird said. And lemonade. Yes, you've all done wonderfully, and all your mothers are coming? I know yours is, of course, Gooney Bird, Mrs. Pigeon said. Everyone else, and some dads and a little brothers and sisters? All the children nodded. And my auntie, Keiko said. And my triplets, Malcolm said, making a face. I hoped they would get chicken box, but they didn't. Please, tell me their names, Felicia Ann begged. There's the teacher writing the words on the board. No, Malcolm said with a scowl. They don't have names. Malcolm, Mrs. Pigeon said, putting her arm gently across his shoulders. They probably have beautiful names, and I hope someday you will tell them to us. You children have all worked very hard. It's just that, she hesitated. What? Asked Beanie. We know all the words to the songs. Well, I'm concerned about the songs, Mrs. Pigeon said. I'm not really a songwriter, and they seem, well, a little slapdash to me. She wrote the word on the board. Oh dear, said Ben when he found out in the dictionary. That's bad. I know, Mrs. Pigeon said, and she wrote the definition on the board. Careless, hasty, unskillful. Our costumes are all made, Tricia added. I'm very concerned about the costumes, Mrs. Pigeon said. I'm not really a costume designer, and they seem slapdash, asked Tyrone. Maybe a little, Mrs. Pigeon said, and ill-fitting. We know our lines, Nicholas said. Mine is, thank you, good friend Squanto. I know it by heart. I'm concerned about the lines, Mrs. Pigeon said. But you wrote the lines, Mrs. Pigeon, Tricia pointed out. I know, but I'm not really a writer. The lines are slapdash. All the children looked at Mrs. Pigeon. She looked very sad. Felicia Ann, the most bashful person in the class, went up to her and gave her a hug. You're a very good teacher, Mrs. Pigeon, she said. You don't have to be a writer or a songwriter or a costume designer or even a Muriel maker because you're a teacher. You taught me to read. Me too, called Tyrone. I couldn't read worth nothing when I came to this class. Now look it. I can read a whole dictionary. Me too, called Ben. I only could read baby books before, but now I can read whole long words. We all can, the other children shouted. Mrs. Pigeon began to cheer up. She smiled at the children. Thank you, she said. I'm sorry that I was depressed for a minute. It's just that the story of the first Thanksgiving is such a truly wonderful story about becoming friends and helping one another and being thankful. I wish I could have presented it better instead of writing a dumb song about a succotash. Mrs. Pigeon, Gooney Bird Greene said, I have an idea. Ooh, we'll have to wait for her idea for next time.